thanks everybody for joining us. We've done this as a general Teams meeting, so that rather than like a webinar session, so that just really to keep it quite an engaging session. So if people do want to jump out, they can do. We'll run through some housekeeping in a second, but hopefully everybody can see my sort of landing screen. I've got a thumbs up there, so that's normally a good sign. So yeah, it's my name's Charles Ross, and I've got Peter Carson with me from Envision IT. We'll do some official sort of intros in just a second, but I did just touch on it there in terms of general housekeeping. So obviously stay on mute if you've got dogs, cats, people knocking at the door and things like that. It can be quite disruptive, so stay on mute. You're more than welcome to sort of raise your hand or even sort of jump out and interrupt Peter or I at any point during the session. We want to keep it engaging. We want to make sure that people are asking the right questions and getting the information that they might want to gather. We will try, if we've got time, open the floor up at the end for some questions. So feel free to wait until then or jump in throughout the session. That's no problem at all. Like I said, just some really brief introductions on us and who we are, because we are two organizations, and this is sort of like a partnership announcement in many ways. Is the first sort of piece of sort of presentation or information gathering that we're doing as a duo. So my name's Charles Ross. A lot of the people on the call will probably know who I am, being that you're already engaged with us through probably LMS, being LMS365 customers. I've been with the company for 8 years yesterday, actually. Which is, it's gone by very quickly, but I'm sort of a specialist in a handful of areas of Microsoft based things that we work with. So SharePoint and Teams based learning management, LMS365, there's going to be a lot of talk of that product throughout today, so the people that aren't familiar with it, hopefully you'll get a flavor of that from today. SharePoint based intranets, SharePoint migrations, data migrations, all of those sort of niches are my sort of area, and do feel free to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn if you wish to do so. I do share some stuff from time to time, and hopefully it is useful. So like I said, just quickly on Essential, Peter, I'll hand over to Peter very shortly to talk about Envision IT. But just to give you an idea, like I said, a lot of people on the call will be aware of us through the LMS365 product that we work with, but we do have our fingers in other pies, if you like. We've got a wealth of knowledge from historical legacy data migrations. That was a big thing, alongside workspace management, but we've always been focused around Microsoft being sort of the central hub of that wheel, if you like. The stuff on the right that you can see there is probably our sort of focus area for today. Modern workplace, maybe not so much, but still very relevant in terms of intranets and design services that we offer, particularly around SharePoint-based intranets. Today, access control and learning management are the two sort of areas that we're going to focus on. So Peter's going to be running us through a number of scenarios, including LMS365 and extending the sort of internal-based LMS content, managing, tracking, reporting, and all of those great things that come with LMS365. How can we extend that to an external sort of audience? And that's how we sort of came to this partnership, because we don't just see it servicing our LMS365 customers. There are loads of pieces and sort of niches to it, which businesses are using day in, day out, which Peter will run into. But I've touched on it already. The learning management piece there is a big focus of our business. LMS365, I think I've got a slide on it just to give you an idea of what it does. LMS365 is basically a fully fledged LMS system that lives within your Microsoft 365 environment. So there'll be lots of people on here already using it. They'll be providing their day-to-day training directly within the flow of work. They bring basically what it does is it brings the training to where people are doing their day-to-day work. So access points are SharePoint and Microsoft Teams as well. It all builds that sort of collaborative learning. No need for people to have different logins and so on. It's all integrated with your Microsoft system, Azure Active Directory, and so on, servicing classroom-based courses, e-learning, peer-to-peer, all of those great aspects of learning and sort of compliance management, if you like. And if anyone wants any further information on LMS365 as a system, there's a form at the end which will be going out, and do feel free to fill that out if you'd like to have a separate call. But it's a fantastic product. But as I mentioned, I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Carson, and I'll hand over to him spare his blushes and let him talk about himself in
Appreciate
terms of
it.
his background and all the great things that Vision IT do, in particular with this Extranet user manager piece that we're going to be discussing today. So
Thanks,
over to you,
Charles.
Peter. No problem.
Yeah, so Peter Carson here, president and founder of both Envision IT and Extranet User Manager. It's actually one corporate entity, but two brands. Envision IT is very similar actually to Essential in the Canadian marketplace. We're based just outside of Toronto in Canada. And Extranet User Manager is our own product that we've developed over the years, working with a lot of different clients. We've got about 100 different implementations out in the field now, and that's going to be the focus of what we're going to be talking about here today. Also a Microsoft MVP, run the local Toronto SharePoint users group. We're going to share these slides out and the recording out afterwards, so you got all my various different links and contact stuff in there. So just a little level set on the Extranet User Manager side. Again, some of the folks on the call are familiar with this side of the product that we're talking about, maybe not as much on the LMS365 side. So we want to make sure everybody understands what we're going through here. So as I mentioned, Envision IT is the parent company. And really, our mission as an organization is about empowering organizations to optimize their external collaboration. It's all about building a digital community outside of your organization, and how do you manage the onboarding, the training, the communications with those folks outside of your organization. User experience, simplicity, balanced with security is what we're all about from that point of view. We do a lot around delegation to allow you to say, hey, IT doesn't need to control all this. We're going to let the business manage, because they're actually the people that are closest to those external partners. They know who should be coming in, and those are the scenarios that we're going to be going through as part of that. The product itself has been around for a long time. It evolved out of the services business. We turned it into a product, but we really rebooted it, sort of midway through last year as we were actually establishing that partnership with LMS365. Previously, we supported more than the Microsoft ecosystem, but we've kind of doubled down and said, okay, our product now is just about external sharing in Microsoft 365 and leveraging all the great security stuff that Microsoft does in Azure Active Directory underneath that. So we launched out a new version of our product in November of last year, about a year ago. We've had about monthly releases since then, and we've been adding new features and such from there. So Charles, why don't I hand it back to you? Take us through the agenda, and then I'll dive into the core meat of the presentation.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, so effectively, Peter's going to be running us through a handful of scenarios. Again, focus being in around LMS365, but do have an open mind, because there are organizations that, like Peter touched on there are many facets to this, sort of extending out our internal information portals, content sites, etc., to external audiences. So there's a number of ways of doing that, via the portal, via invitations, and so on. Peter's going to run us through those. Talk around IT concerns. They're inevitable when it comes to implementing anything into a business's IT infrastructure. Talking about the tight links to AD, how it's managed, and all those admin portal stuff that IT are always concerned about, which is great. Registrations, being able to sort of delegate those off as well, in terms of alleviating some of the stress, help desk inquiries, allowing those subsets of teams such as L&D or HR, whoever, to manage those registration process to get the external users to the content that they need to require. Again, streamlining that process, and then how that all looks with EUM and LMS365, because I know Peter's got a really cool use case from a customer that's been recently onboarded, which he will talk about, and that should definitely keep you guys interested. So Peter, is it now? Do you want to hand over to the demonstration now? Are there a few more slides you want to talk through before you jump into that?
There's a couple of slides, but it's actually my screen that I'm sharing now, so
okay,
I'm all
fine.
set to go from that point of view.
I can't see it, so I'm glad you said that.
No worries. All right, so we're going to dive into the product side. I wanted to give you a little context and background. So EOM Admin is sort of the administrative console, maybe not the best name in hindsight, because the whole idea here is it's not an IT administration tool. It's a tool for the business users themselves to say, hey, I want to create groups, I want to run people into those groups, and in our scenario here, I want to associate those groups with course catalogs, with training plans, with courses that I want those external learners to go through. So we're going to go through a demonstration of that and what that looks like. just coming back to the security side for a minute, though, I actually just recently spoke at a major security conference here in Toronto, a couple hundred folks in my session talking about Azure AD and Microsoft security. I don't want to get too technical in this talk, but if there's folks on the call that are saying, hey, I've got alarm bells or red flags going off that my IT security folks are going to be upset about this, we'll provide some links after the session. They can go deep into that side. We're actually going to publish up the recording from that session that goes way under the hood in terms of the technical side of it. We're going to stay on the business side of it. The other piece we're going to look at is our portal. It's all part of the same solution, but this is, instead of your business owners that are managing those external learners, this is literally the place where those external learners first come to. How do they self-register? How do they onboard? How do they find their course catalogs, their courses and such from there? So that's really the scenarios that we're going to go through here. And again, just to go a little bit deeper on the business case, as I mentioned, that EUM admin tool, that first one that I showed you there, that's for your learning administrators to manage those external users. And the idea is that you decouple that from IT. They don't need to go, IT, here's another service ticket to invite another person in. They can do that themselves. But IT can feel comfortable that the right roles are in place and the right security is in place, that they're not going to do something they shouldn't do, and that's all going to hang together properly from a security perspective. The other thing is, all of what we're talking about here, both our Extranet User Manager product and the LMS365 product, are built inside of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. But we want to make sure that your brand comes through as part of that. That people shouldn't see Microsoft branded all over this. It is your learning portal. The things like the emails that go out, even the URLs that the portal is published on, the look and feel of it is all going to be unique to you from that perspective. That automation in the second scenario that we're going to talk about with NHS, National Health Service, where literally they have tens of thousands of learners that they need to onboard. We need to have some automation there. It can't be a one of, I'm going to invite 10,000 people by hand one at a time. It's just not going to work. The actual permissions and underlying security is still managed by IT, so they should feel comfortable from that point of view. And as Charles mentioned, our focus here today is from a learning management point of view, but this has a much broader application. We have clients in a lot of different scenarios where they're sharing out not just learning, but enterprise data, collaboration, publishing, all types of scenarios fit in from that perspective. All right, so let's take you actually through two scenarios. That's going to be the meat of what we're going to talk about here today. And the first is the simpler one, which is you don't have 35,000 people that you want to bring in like NHS. You've got a handful at a time, 100, 200, things like that, that you do want to do what's called a direct invitation process. So you don't want people to be able to discover your learning portal and just self-register and start taking courses. You know who those people are and you want to invite them in as part of that. And I'll walk you through live what this looks like, but basically you come into the EUM admin portal here and say, either I want to do a one-of add up a new user, or maybe I've got an Excel spreadsheet with 100 people that I need to sign up for this course, and I import those people in. Those people are going to get a welcome email to say, welcome to the learning portal, here's the link to get in, and they're going to come to the portal site itself, enter their email address. I should take a minute to talk about the login process itself. When you invite these people in, they're not creating a credential on your system. There's sort of two scenarios that we're going to cover off here. One is that the person that you're inviting in works for an organization that uses Microsoft 365 themselves. It's actually a very easy scenario for them because they're going to use their same credentials that they use to do their work with their own organization. In fact, if they have a browser open when they get that email that's already signed in, say to their corporate intranet, and they click the link, they actually literally just come right through it. It single signs them in. So it's a very nice user experience from that point of view. If they're not working for an organization that uses Microsoft, they'll use what's called a one-time passcode. They'll basically get a code from Microsoft saying, hey, you're trying to sign in, here's your code, now you're into the learning portal. So again, no passwords to forget or to have to reset. It's very simple, seamless from that point of view. And that latter scenario is the one that we're going to go through. They come into the portal and then they're into the course catalog. So let's actually go through that live here together. So I'm going to start in Essentials portal. So we actually just stood this up last week for Essential to say, hey, let's get a demo version of our product running in the Essential environment. And the other sort of technical tidbit to share here is typically we don't operate as a software as a service. We don't run the product for our clients. They actually run it in their own Microsoft tenant and they control and manage that. So there's no concern that, hey, we have the keys to all the users in your organization. No, that's all on your side. So here, this is actually all on Essentials side, but they've been kind enough to put me into the administrator group in their tenant so that I can actually come in as a full-fledged administrator and do all the different things in here. So I can add new users, I can search users, I can even add whole new groups. But there's a whole model around what roles do you delegate out, say, to your learning management, and what are they able to do? Can they create a whole new group, or can they just manage the people that are in their group? You could even delegate, just like this scenario, to administrator within your external organization, and then they can pick who they're inviting in from their organization. So it gives a lot of flexibility from a security model point of view. But let's go down the path that, hey, we just want to invite a one-of user in through here. So I'll use some very creative names. I think I've already done some dry runs. I think webinar 4 is my next one to try here. And I'm going to use a demonstration email service that we use quite often called Mailinator. It's an easy way to sort of create accounts on the fly very quickly. And I didn't show you the groups under the hood. I'm going to show you that in a minute, but I'm going to put them into a learner group here called Course Catalog. Now we have a lot more fields in here. A lot of our clients don't use all these. You can customize that and pare that down and say, okay, maybe there's only, name and email address and organization. That's all I care about adding in for learners, part of that. So you decide as part of your implementation, how do I want to profile my external learners and what does that look like? So when I hit save here, what's happening under the hood is our product is talking to Microsoft, and it's actually adding that user as a guest in Essentials tenant. So now that webinar 4 at mailinator.com exists as a guest over in Essential, and we've also added it to a group, and we've got some hooks between our product and LMS365 that actually puts that user into a course catalog that's associated with that group. So all of those decisions are kind of pre-built and baked. So me as a learning administrator just knows, hey, when I add this person to this group, everything gets magically set up and they're good to go from that perspective. So actually, if we have a look at that group for a second here and go into that course catalog group, this is more on the administration side as you're setting things up. There's the details around the group itself, and there's some connections to LMS365 to say, hey, this is the course catalog that we're going into. If we come over to the join page here, we've actually left this one as what's called a public group. So if you were to go to the Essential portal that I'm going to show you in a second, you'd actually be able to self-discover this group and say, hey, I'd like to join it. And we've actually left approvals off so people can actually just join and actually experience LMS 365 as part of that. We can share these links out. You can actually try this live yourself as part of this as well. Normally in the scenario I'm showing here, we would say this is invitation only and people can't discover it. They have to be invited in as part of that. And you can define, what do I want to send out as a welcome email to them? What link do I want to give them to go into the course catalog and understand that whole process? And again, this email gets sent out under the Essential brand from an Essential mailbox, so it's not a Microsoft email that's getting sent out. And if I look at my users tab here, I should see that user that I just added in. There's webinar 4 right there as a member. If I wanted to take that person out of the course, I could just trash can them and go from there. When I want to delegate, I could say, hey, maybe I want Charles to be the membership manager for this group, then he would be able to do the things that I was doing. Except as a membership manager, he can't break the group, he can't delete the group. He can just decide who are the people that are in there versus an owner that has full control around that. And if we did have approvals turned on and somebody asked to join the group, we would see them here from a pending workflow point of view to say, hey, this person is asked to join. Do you want to add them to the group and give them access from there? But let's flip over. I'm going to open up an in private window here. And what I want to do is start in Mailinator. So imagine this is my Outlook and I am this webinar 4 person. And I'm looking at my inbox. We've actually left both welcome emails on, the one that says, hey, just welcome to the portal as a whole, and the second one, welcome to this particular course catalog. Normally you would do one or the other as part of that. But if I come into this second one here, that's the email that I was showing you a second ago in the admin. So we decided this is what we want to communicate out. You'd want to be a little splashier with your content and really bring them in and entice them into the learning from there. But I can go ahead and click on that. Here's the catalog page. And I'm actually getting pointed right into the SharePoint Online in Essentials Microsoft 365 where that course catalog is hosted. Now, because we just set this up, we haven't had a chance to do some of the branding, but we can actually update the branding on Essentials tenant so it says Essential Computing here, and it feels like I'm going into Essential as part of that. But the login experience is basically I enter my email address, I hit next, and because this particular account doesn't have an organization that they work for that uses Microsoft 365, it uses what's called the one-time passcode. So Microsoft has sent a code over to me. So if I go back to my inbox here, we'll see this, it's saying from Cloud Essentials, but it actually came out of Microsoft itself. And I need this code here in order to sign in. So I just paste that code back into the login form, no password, and away I go from there. Now, this is my first time coming in. I need to consent to say, hey, I'm signing into this Cloud Essentials site that's providing training. Yes, they're going to get my profile data and they're going to be able to log and see my activity, but they don't get anything more from me. So it's a very minimal ask, but everybody has to go through this once as part of this. The other thing that we can do at this point here, once I accept that, is we can actually put a custom terms and conditions up there as well. So if you've got particular T's and C's that you want people to accept before they start doing their training, you can actually capture that as part of the Microsoft login process itself.
And Peter,
but now, sorry, go ahead, Charles.
Quick question in the chat, actually. So just for this might be on the mind of a few people on here. So if an organization, let's say, has big groups of partners or external contractors or people that are external, but there are big groups of those, can they upload a list to that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there is an Excel import. So we have a template that you can fill out to say, hey, you've got your 100 people that you want to invite in, and you can actually define, maybe not all those 100 people go in the same groups in the same course catalog. So you can actually do that row by row in your spreadsheet, import that in through our admin interface, and it'll actually send out those 100 welcome emails to all those users from there. So absolutely, yeah, it can be a one-of, or it can be a batch process.
Yeah, super. Thank you.
And often in our implementations, it can be integrated into other line of business systems. Maybe there's something that happens in your Salesforce or your Dynamics 365 or SAP that wants to trigger this. We can build those sorts of custom integrations as well, so people don't even need to invite. It just builds as part of your business process. Now, Charles, I know we didn't want to go too deep on the LMS 365, but I know we've got a few folks on the call that probably haven't seen it at all. Where's a good place to go in your portal just to give a sense of what happens here now that we're in the course catalog?
Well, I think a great place to start. I mean, this homepage here, for a prime example, it obviously looks fairly like SharePoint, but this is a fully customizable. So you can have whatever branding. We do a full branding piece with our customers anyway. But I mean, just scrolling down here, there's useful links, there's embedded areas of the system, external to the system, and so on. But I think a really good place for people, if they're just coming in and they need to see what content they've got available to them, is that select my training area along the top panel there, Peter, because that is going to take us directly to the course catalog and what effectively these users can get, and it can be tailored to meet certain requirements, whatever business they work in, and so on. And there can be numerous iterations of these course catalogs. I'm sorry, that's typical, isn't it, on a demo? There's no courses found in this particular one. Well, they would be presented with a handful of courses.
Here's my shopping list of things that I can start taking as a trainer.
Exactly. And that can be a mixture of all content types, in-person training, webinars, and so on. And every user has their own training progress, that training progress, that dashboard along the top. Obviously, yours being this Mailinator is not going to have anything in there, but that's where they can access all of their, if there's mandatory training, if they want to check on their learning journey, download their certificates, look at their competencies, and so on. There's loads of great things for users, end users. Even if it's a one-off piece of training for a compliance, you need to do this to be authorized to work on this particular site, they can come in and do this. Or it could be a complete catalog of optional training that we can present to them, even if they're external to the business.
Yeah, I mean you can build a very bespoke training plan on their behalf. Absolutely. And they come in and they say, oh, these are the 3 courses I need to take, then I need to take these quizzes, and then I get this certificate, and I can see all that in my training progress. And
exactly.
And now I'm in compliance.
That can be role based, that can be location based, it can be based on whatever you guys like. And obviously we can map to existing content, we can build custom content for those scenarios. So this is obviously a little bit of a blank canvas, but the options really are endless when it comes to those.
Very good. Cool. Well, why don't I switch here now? I'm going to come back to the deck just to set the stage for our next demo that we want to go through. As we mentioned, National Health Service, Mersey Care, one of the largest trusts providing health services in the UK, 1.4 million people being serviced, but more importantly, 35,000 medical personnel that need to go through training. So how do you manage training at that scale? That's really the challenge here, and also not necessarily knowing exactly who all those 35,000 people are. So this is a different scenario where we're not going to build an Excel with 35,000 people in it and import it in. We're actually going to let those people come and self-discover and self-identify, but then go through some specific rules to make sure that they're properly registered and they're brought into the appropriate training from there. So the idea is I'll show you our dev version of this portal. In full disclosure, this is not a live site yet. We haven't launched this out yet. We're just crossing the T's and dotting the last I's on this as we get ready to launch out. But the idea is that any of those 35,000 people, they all have a mailbox with their employer that will have a very specific email domain. I'm Peter at envisionit.com. Envisionit.com is my email domain of my mail address. And that's actually a very key thing from a security point of view. We can use that to say, how do we prove that you work for that organization? We have an email from that organization. That ties it together quite nicely. And that's a big part of the registration process, is to say, hey, as users come in, first off, they need to be on that whitelisted list of email domains, or they just can't proceed from there. Once we've checked that box, we say, okay, which email domain are they from? And some of them are one-to-one. If they have this email domain, they're with this organization. Some of them cross boundaries to say, hey, this one email domain could mean any one of these 6 organizations. So we'll ask that question and say, okay, now we need you to further identify which organization you belong to. And depending on those choices, defines rules. There's actually 2 separate course catalogs that they could end up in as a result of which organization they're ultimately working for. But again, this is all automation. Nobody's approving each one. Nobody's making a decision what course catalog to put that person into, which makes it very scalable from that perspective.
And Peter, there's another question in the chat, sort of related to what you were talking about there. In terms of integrations with Teams and Viva and so on, just to touch on it from an LMS365 perspective, absolutely. In terms of Teams integration and so on, everything can be accessed through Teams, which allows for your collaboration and so on. Viva the same with LMS365. But in terms of EUM, how do the two sit together?
Sure, great question. So when I came here to this search groups page, I'm actually in the NHS one now. These groups are actually what are called Azure Active Directory groups under the hood. So they're Microsoft groups. And anytime you create something in 365, if I create a team through Microsoft Teams, the main, who's the owner and who are the members of that team is actually an Azure AD group under the hood. So you can create a team and then you can set it up in EUM to say, hey, now it's available for external users. And when I did what I did previously on the Essential side and added a person to that group through here, that would actually put them into a Microsoft team as part of that, or into a Microsoft 365 group. It can map over to those entities that are on the Microsoft 365 side, because we're built completely on top of that. Everything we're doing is natively working against that. We don't have our own database of groups and of users. It's literally what's in your tenant. We're live calling what's the graph, called the graph API under the hood to query that, to update that, to do things. So it's literally live happening. You'll see it pop up in the Teams and in other places in 365 as part of those actions.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. Dan, I hope that answered your question. If there's any follow-ups, then do post them in the chat. That'd be great. Thanks, Peter.
Welcome. So here, let me grab a quick link here. Just copying that on my other screen. And I do the same thing. I'm going to come over into an in private window. And let's say I'm a brand new, NHS staff member at one of those organizations. And it's been communicated to me that I should come here for my learning. So that, could be an all hands corporate communication. It could be on my intranet, could be posted on the lunchroom wall. It doesn't matter. How did I come here? And now I'm at the learning portal. This is sort of the starting point of the journey there. So let's say we come through and we'll be creative and do webinar 5 at Mailinator. Even though it's a different environment, that's fine. We'll keep it separate and go ahead and continue. Now, in this case, we've done a query and said, hey, I've never seen webinar 5 at mailinator.com before. This must be a brand new person. We're going to take you into the registration process. If I'd already registered, it would have taken me right into the sign-on and into my course catalog, and I would start doing my learning. So one of the things we wanted to achieve with the product is avoid the confusion of, do I need to register? Do I need to log in? I can't remember if I have an account because it's been a year since I've been here. Just give us your email address. We'll figure out what path you need to take and keep it simple from that point of view. So I'll go ahead and just put in my info here. And this list of organizations, I'm going to show you in a minute sort of the under the hood and how this works. The choices that I see here are based on the email domain that I've entered in. And this isn't the real NHS portal. This is our test portal in our environment. So these are sort of made up organizations and domains from there. So I'm just going to pick one from there, pick my department. And the CEO of that one, and say, go ahead and register. Now this process takes a little while because there's actually a lot of things that are happening under the hood. So actually, while that's happening, let's come back over here for a second. And this is going to look a little overwhelming, but let me see if I can talk you through what's happening here. This is basically the lookup list that drives this whole registration. And this was built custom for NHS Mersey. And it's basically saying, we see all these different email domains here, and those email domains represent different organizations. So that list of drop-down organizations, because I entered mailinator.com, if I come a little further down in the list here, there's my Mailinator row, says, hey, here's the list of organizations that should be in that pick list when I come in with this email domain. And regardless of what, in this case, which of those organizations I pick, put me into the group called Other. So let's come over to that for a second here, and we've got this other group that we've created here. So it's associated with a particular course catalog in LMS365 so that it wires people up and puts them into that course. From a join point of view, it's invitation only. It's not really invitation, it's just we don't want people to self-discover it. We want them to go through this auto registration and assignment process through that. And then if I come over into the users here, there's my webinar 5 user. So that job is run far enough now that it's actually put me into that group and it's ready to go from that point of view. And I should have a welcome email. Oh no, we've turned off the welcome email on this one. This is our test environment. Okay, so let's come back to my in private window. Okay, so it's finished the registration and it's taking me through to the sign in. You can see here we put some Envision IT branding on this particular one. Again, that would be NHS Mersey in their actual environment. And we're back at the same spot where we were in the previous demo where we need a code sent to us. So let's go over to Mailinator again. There's my account verification code that I got from Microsoft. I can drop that in and go ahead and sign in. Same thing, I've got to accept the consent because this is my first time coming into the portal. And now it's going to flip me over to the portal itself. So the portal here that it's coming to is a branded experience for the users to come into. But what happened there is we saw, hey, you only belong to one group. There's only one place you can go, so I'm not even going to bother asking you. I'm just going to flip you over into the course catalog in LMS365. And just like the previous demo, we actually haven't populated any courses into our test LMS365 here. But normally, I would either be in a course catalog, a training plan, or potentially just a specific course that I need to take based on those rules that were driven through that registration process. And again, I can do all the same things here in terms of my training dashboard, certifications, all those sorts of things. So if we recap back over that, I was able to come to that site at the beginning. In fact, here, let's close the in private and just kind of start that fresh again. So I was able to find my way to this portal here. I was self-identified as belonging to one of the organizations that are supposed to receive this training. It had some rules in the back end. We actually use a technology called Logic Apps, which is a workflow engine from Microsoft to drive those rules and say, what groups should I put you in? What things should I do? When that's done, it redirected me over. I signed in and I'm in the training portal. So in sort of 60 seconds to fill out the form and another 60 seconds for that workflow to run, I'm up and I'm running, and I'm ready to start my training. So it's a very quick way to onboard large numbers of users. We did a similar project a couple of years ago with an association here in Canada called the Ontario Association Children and Aid Societies. I mean, very same sort of thing where they need to provide training. They were onboarding 500 plus people per day into that training portal. They could never do that manually themselves. They didn't even know who all those people were. Interestingly enough, it actually gave them a great database at the end of that to say, we now better understand who our volunteers and who our staff are that are working at the 55 plus different children's aid societies across the province here in Canada. So, very bespoke, branded, tailored experience through there, and minimal number of steps that I need to go through to understand how that works. So those were really the two scenarios that we wanted to take you through from that perspective. Charles, do we have other questions on the chat side? I haven't been watching there.
No, there's nothing in the chat, but I don't know if this would be a good opportunity to open it to the floor. Peter, would you like to do that?
Absolutely. I love questions.
Just see if anybody does have anything to.
So feel free to come off mute if you want, or put it into the chat. Up to you.
So when will this be live? Because I think right now this is not included.
Correct. This is not currently live. The NHS. That's a daily question. We're sorting out the last few details and just going through user acceptance testing. So we're a little behind schedule. It was supposed to actually be launched previously. We're pushing hard to get it across the finish line, literally, day by day as we're going through here.
Thumbs up. That's a good one. And Dan's had a follow-up question as well. How do you handle multilingual scenarios?
Great question. So the in-market product, like the last release that we released in September, doesn't currently support multilingual, but we've actually investing heavily right now, and we're just finishing off the next release, which is all about multilingual from the end user's point of view. So this portal here, we actually have a client here in Canada. They're a global manufacturing company, and they want to provide approvals and sign-offs of engineering drawings for products that they're going to be manufacturing. They need their portal in 6 different languages: English, French, German. I forget. There's a couple of more obscure ones in there. So we've built the ability to present this portal here in as many different languages as you want to translate your portal across into. Now, we still don't have firm plans. It's on the roadmap to say, okay, how do we make this part of it multilingual? To say, hey, I want as a learning administrator or a group owner to work in French instead of English or Spanish or what have you. We have thoughts and plans around that, but we don't have a firm release plan on that. But the end user portal side of it, we are on track to be launching that next month. So we are pretty proud about what we've built from a multilingual perspective.
And Dan, just to touch on it from an LMS365 perspective, it is a multilingual platform. It picks up automatically from the end user's language preferences. There's a load of supported languages. I think there's too many to list.
I think there's about 23 or 29. I was just having that conversation with them.
Yeah, exactly. And whether the same thing happens here, I'm not sure. But yeah, LMS365 does that. And obviously, if you've got content in multi languages as well, you can set up some pretty cool workflows that will look at that same attribute and actually present those courses to those end users in the language of their preference language, which is really neat and being used by a handful of our sort of multi-global organizations, which is great.
Yeah, so what will happen in our product is a lot of the translation work is actually going to be on your side, because things like what do you want to say on the join page and the member page, and what do you want to have in the email, you'll have a language flip here to say, okay, now I need to do all that content in French. Now I need to do it all in Spanish. So it doesn't come for free. There's work involved on your side to fully populate that user experience in whatever languages you want to support. But the idea is that the product is fully extensible and will support as many different languages as you want to support.
Cool, thank you, Peter. And then there's one more question as well that we've had in the chat. What happens when someone leaves the partner company or the contractor company or whoever we're extending that information to externally? How do you sever that access to those?
Another
users?
Great question. So two things there. One is that you have to remember that if whether that organization has 365 themselves or not, like whether you go through that one-time passcode that I showed you or they use their own organizational credentials, in both those cases, they need access to their mailbox with that organization in order to access your portal. first thing a company does when they terminate somebody or when they decide to resign, they're going to shut that mailbox down. So that person is no longer going to have access, and they won't be able to come into the portal. So you've taken off the biggest issue with a lot of extranets, which is how do I stop people that no longer work for my partner organization to come into my portal? They won't be able to because they won't come through there. And part of that is policy on your side. Do you allow people to use personal Gmail accounts that maybe the organization doesn't control? Then you've lost that ability to do that. So there's some best practices from that point of view. The other piece, we don't have it lit up yet in the Essential portal, as we have we're very proud of the Power BI report that we've created in here that provides analytics. It says, okay, show me a profile of when users have last logged in, how stale are they, who are people that haven't logged in the last 90 days or the last year, and you can start to make decisions on that to say, hey, do I deactivate those accounts? Do I delete them? Do we put some automation in to say, hey, if a person hasn't logged in a year, just remove their account altogether. That could be advantageous, particularly from an LMS point of view, because we didn't get into the licensing side, but you pay for every learner that you have set up, whether they're internal to your organization or external. It's all based on seat count and learner count. If that account is either deactivated so they can't sign in or deleted altogether from your tenant, you don't pay for that seat anymore, and you can reuse it and give it to somebody different. But LMS365 doesn't delete all their data. If that person comes back and you light them back up again, they haven't lost their certifications and history there. It's just you need to start paying for that license again in that scenario. So it's a really nice way to balance your licensing spend from that point of view, and also ensure that, hey, we've got some governance around offboarding of people as well as onboarding.
So just to let everybody know, there will be a follow-up email to everybody that joined, and even the people that weren't able to make it today. That will include the recording of this session. So if you want to go back and watch it again, or review anything that we've spoken about today, that will be in there. And we'll also include a feedback form as well. So if you want any more information, there's a handful of boxes to fill out there. If you want any more information on EUM, LMS365, how the two sit together, what else can it do, all of those great things, then feel free to jump into that feedback form, provide us any comments if you like as well, and we will reach out and come back to you with answers to your questions, and even get a call set up with you guys. So that will be coming out fairly shortly, I believe. And I think are we right on time?
We have like 60 seconds left, so we got time to say thank you to everybody, and and wish them well with the rest of your morning or afternoon, depending on what side of the pond you're on.
And I can't believe we managed to squeeze all that in such a timely fashion. But perfect. Thank you everybody for joining. Like Peter said, really appreciate your time. Hope you enjoyed the session. If there's any questions, follow-up questions, etc., do feel free to reach out. Get us on LinkedIn, get us wherever you can, and we will hopefully service you in as best we can. But thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Okay, bye.
Cheers, everyone.
For the rest of your
Bye.
day.